Hello, and welcome to my webinar under the title of How to Practice Mindfulness When You've Got Zero Extra Time in Your Day. My name is Dr. Itai Tzan. I've been a university psychology professor for about 15 years now, researching and teaching mindfulness, running mindfulness courses and mindfulness teacher trainings and mindfulness retreats. I'm asking myself, why is it that mindfulness has been the center of my work throughout the years? And I realized that I've practiced so many different well-being tools. And out of all these different tools that invite us to enhance our self-actualization and self-awareness and levels of psychological and physiological well-being, out of all these different tools, mindfulness always feels to me the one that is most simple and also very clearly indicated by scientific data, the one that is most impactful, the one that is most helpful. And I get the same responses from my students, from my clients, from groups that I work with, that mindfulness has been very, very helpful for them. Now, it's interesting to consider the journey that mindfulness kind of went through in the last 20 years, because when I just started this kind of work, the main question around mindfulness was, does it actually work? Is it going to help us? Back then, the idea was that perhaps just sitting and relaxing would be as beneficial as practicing mindfulness. 20 years later, with all the scientific support we get from hundreds and even more than 1,000 studies by now, the question has completely changed. It isn't whether or not I should practice as much as how do I establish a daily practice of mindfulness? How can I create this kind of regular mindfulness practice? And I think that this is why the question we're posing today as part of this webinar is really important, because this is a neglected question. The question of how do I actually do it in my everyday life? My everyday life is filled with so many different activities, I'm juggling so many balls, I'm busy, I'm doing so many things. I realize that mindfulness is helpful, but how do I find ways to integrate it into my everyday life? And that's what we're going to answer in our webinar today. Now, when we think about mindfulness, the first image that comes to our mind is this Buddhist monk sitting at the top of a mountain. You know, he's got a long beard and he's got maybe even long dreadlocks, and he's sitting there rigidly meditating. He's been there for weeks and maybe even months or even years. He's sitting at the entrance to this cave, and that's how he's meditating, and that's the way mindfulness is practiced. It might be a subconscious image of mindfulness, but it's there in the background of our relationship with meditation. But in reality, mindfulness is quite a simple experience. Now, there are many different definitions to mindfulness, and I think some of them are overcomplicated. I believe that mindfulness is very simple. The way I define mindfulness is by stating that mindfulness is practiced any moment when the activity that you perform and your mind are one. You see, in our normal state of consciousness, we experience what we call duality. Duality is any moment when two things are disconnected. They are experienced on two different levels. And in this case, it's what you do and where your mind is. That's the duality. Yeah? They are disengaged. So, for example, I would sit and work and I would I don't know, write an email, or I would complete this document I need to complete for work. And then I will find my mind wandering to this conversation I need to have with my friend, right? Duality, disconnection. They are not one. So I'm not practicing mindfulness. I'm not experiencing mindfulness. And then I would sit with my friend and I would talk to them, and my mind again will wander. You know, what am I going to eat tonight? Pizza, or am I going to order Chinese? Bang, I'm gone, right? So there's again a duality. The activity is the conversation, and my mind is somewhere else. And then I sit and have that dinner I've been thinking about, and as I eat, I am thinking about the book that I want to read, or the movie I want to watch, or whatever. So again, we have that duality, and so on and so forth. This is a never-ending cycle of mind wandering, a never-ending cycle of duality, of breaking that relationship between activity, whatever I do, and my mind, wherever my attention is focused. Now, that is duality, which means that in theory, we could then experience mindfulness any moment. Any moment, any experience is an invitation for that unity of activity and mind, anything we do. And the way we think about it as part of mindfulness practice is just distinguishing between formal practice of mindfulness and informal practice of mindfulness. Let's start with the formal practice. The formal practice is any practice of mindfulness where you set aside time to practice. So say, for example, you practice 15 minutes of breathing meditation in the morning and 15 minutes in the evening, or 30 minutes of loving kindness meditation in the middle of your day. That's your formal practice. Whatever. An hour of Vipassana in the morning and an hour of Vipassana in the evening. Whatever your technique is, that is the formal practice. So we say, okay, now I'm stepping aside from my daily activities and I'm devoting time to the practice of mindfulness, which is great. It is highly, highly beneficial. So when we think, I mean, when people talk about, I can't really practice mindfulness, they say, well, I've got so many things, I need to be so productive, I need to do so many things, I can't practice mindfulness. But if you think about it on a simple productivity level, there are very, very interesting insights for us to derive here. Because if you think about, say, for example, John, and John is experiencing his kind of daily activities 16 hours during the day. He's asleep for 8 hours, he's active for 16 hours, and that allows him, say, a productivity score of 10. That's John. And then we have Jane. And Jane is saying, I have the same 16 hours, but I'm going to be active for 15 and a half hours, and I'm going to dedicate 30 minutes to my formal practice. As I said, say 15 minutes in the morning and 15 minutes in the evening. Jane's level of productivity will be 12. Think about it. Think about what we're saying. Although John has been spending more time being active, thinking that he needs to do so many things that he has to dedicate more time to it, he achieved less, he enjoyed it less, the quality of what he has done has been reduced, and he hasn't done as much as Jane did. That's something we can very clearly show through scientific studies. So on a very practical level, the practice of mindfulness when it comes to your productivity is well worth it. And a lot of people will say, well, this is all very nice, but the thing is that I find it hard to establish a daily formal practice. So I would practice it for a few days, maybe even a couple of weeks, and then at some point it's gone. I realize a few days or a few weeks later that I haven't been practicing for a while. How do I establish that daily regular practice? And I ask them, do you brush your teeth? They say, well, yes, of course I brush my teeth. Do you brush your teeth every single day? Of course I brush my teeth every single day. Once in the morning, once in the evening. That's part of my daily ritual, of course. Well, why do you do that? And the answer to that question is very simple. We do that because we have been conditioned, we have learned that brushing of our teeth is crucial for the hygiene of our teeth and our gums, and that if we don't brush our teeth, then there are repercussions, and I would have to go and see the dentist, and it'll be very painful, and I'll have to pay a lot of money. So obviously, I'm brushing my teeth daily. What if we could internalize, really, truly, on a deep level, that mindfulness is as crucial for the hygiene of our mind as brushing our teeth is for our teeth? What if we could truly internalize that simple realization that if we don't brush our mind daily with the practice of mindfulness, We then experience pain. We then experience a lot of difficulties, right? Our ability to deal with the world in a balanced, peaceful, wise manner is significantly reduced. Right? So if we can internalize that simple realization, would be easier to establish that daily ritual. There'll be no more doubts from the mind, because you see, where is the difficulty? It's where the mind kicks in and says, well, you need to do this, and you need to write this thing, and you need to go and do that task. So don't spend time practicing mindfulness. But if you could have a very clear internal answer as to, wait a second, this is well worth my time, because when I will get back to the activity, I will be more productive, I will enjoy it more, it would be easier to establish that daily ritual. And yet, sometimes we really find it difficult to establish that formal practice in our daily lives. For whatever reason, it might be super busy or overwhelmed by a certain situation. It's just difficult to find that time and set aside time for the practice of mindfulness. And for that purpose, we could practice our informal practice. We could practice mindfulness informally. How does that work? Well, mindfulness practiced informally is the practice of mindfulness where we integrate mindfulness into existing daily activities. So we don't set aside any time, special time, for the practice of mindfulness, as much as integrating it into existing activities we already perform. Now, the idea is to transform what I talked about earlier, about mind wandering, into mindfulness within the activities. So we have a lot of scientific data showing that mind wandering is harmful to our psychological well-being. Experiencing mindfulness is much more beneficial for our well-being. So if we could transform mind wandering within certain activities in our lives into presence, into that unity I talked about of activity and attention and mind, then we could have more mindfulness and enjoy its benefits. So, for example, the experience of walking, right? We all walk, more or less. Well, we usually walk from point A to point B just to get from point A to point B. And our mind is wandering throughout the walking experience. But what if we could be very present as we walk? What if we could really notice our feet touching the ground and our knees and legs and hips move, and notice our environment and notice our breath as we walk? If we do that, we're practicing mindfulness. If we do that, the activity, walking, and our mind are focused on the same thing, the same place, right? No mind wandering, so I'm experiencing mindfulness. Or eating, there's so much invitation for mindfulness, so much invitation for presence in the experience of eating. The smell, the taste, the texture of the food, they are all little invitations, whispers from the experience in the morning, in the moment. Come meet the experience, the activity you're going through. And when we pay attention at that moment, we're practicing mindfulness, as simple as that. Any moment when you eat and you really, truly, fully notice, what do you experience, whether it's the smell or the taste or the texture, you are practicing mindfulness. On a very practical, simple level, you're practicing mindfulness. Or, for example, running and swimming. Those are two activities that a lot of people kind of follow daily. When you run, you could very clearly notice the muscles moving in your body. You can feel the sweat dripping. You can feel the wind caressing your face. You can anchor your attention anywhere within the activity of running, and then you're practicing mindfulness. Yeah, the same for swimming, noticing the movement of the body in the water. Even a practice at the gym could be mindfulness based. Gardening, Another great example that a lot of people share with me as their space of practicing mindfulness, being very, very present with the soil and the plants and whatever they do as part of the activity of gardening. Yeah, I'm there with my attention as I'm gardening. I'm practicing mindfulness. Taking a shower, another great example, right? Take a shower, I can feel the water, I can feel the temperature of the water, I can feel the soap in my body. These are all anchors to the moment so that I could be present and practice mindfulness. Do you see how if you created the right attitude and changed your experience of attention, how you could practice mindfulness with zero extra time in your daily lives? There's not a single human being who's not doing at least some of these things I've just mentioned. Everyone, we all do some of that. As long as you do them, you have a potential invitation into practice of mindfulness. We now have a series of studies with people who wash the dishes. Very, very interesting studies to do with mindfulness. So, I mean, can you think of an activity that is more mundane, more kind of daily, repetitive experience that most people use, obviously, for mind wandering, right? I'm washing the dishes while I'm thinking about other things. But just see what happens when we integrate mindfulness into this daily activity. Imagine I take 100 people. Randomly, I allocate them into two groups, a thinking group and a mindfulness group. So both groups then wash the dishes, same dishes for the same amount of time, 20 minutes, same temperature of the water, so everything is precisely the same with one obvious difference. Group A are being told, think about whatever you want as you wash the dishes. Group B, they are being told, well, now that they're being told how to practice mindfulness and then apply the practice of mindfulness to the washing of the dishes. So as you wash the dishes, feel the temperature of the water, feel the texture of the liquid soap, feel the texture of the plate, and so on and so forth. So be very present. And what are the results of this practice? Well, the mindfulness group was showing higher states of mindfulness, which is quite natural and almost obvious, but they were also showing higher levels of positive affect, positive emotions, and lower levels of negative affect, negative emotions. And that's something we consistently see through our scientific studies, whether it's with walking or running or washing the dishes or even texting. Presence makes us more effective, more productive, more enjoyable. The whole experience is more enjoyable. We experience more positive emotions. We feel less stressed as a result of it. You see, when the mind wanders, it goes into these stories, and that's when anxiety kicks in. When you are present, the mind could take a breath, soften, relax, and the body then relaxes, and then your whole experience of life is softening. Even if it's for a short period of time, that's all you need, a little break, so that you can go back into the doing, back into the activity of life, a little bit more soft and relaxed. Now, it's important for me to emphasize that this could be applied anywhere, anytime. We could be practicing it, as I said, while texting. We could be practicing this while having sex with our partner, right? Having sex present, being there with every breath, with the movement of the body, compared to having sex while having the mind wandering is a very, very different experience. And we derive different levels of joy and pleasure out of it when we're present. There's a much more significant enjoying and pleasure that is rooted in our sex. Having a conversation is an invitation for great presence, for that alignment of activity and the mind. Dancing, right? Another great space where we can bring in that beautiful experience. I'm breathing with my body, with the movement of the body. And it has a huge impact on our well-being. So those are just examples. But as you can see, these examples are taken from our daily lives. We all do these things, and we could practice then mindfulness without spending a single second outside the time we already spent on these activities. Now, just to set our expectations on a kind of realistic level, when we bring our awareness into the moment, into the activity, whatever the activity is, we very frequently find our mind wanders quickly. So we start by, say for example, as we walk, we begin by that unity, or by creating that unity of activity and mind. So we're very, very aware of the movement of the muscles and so on and so forth. And then we'll find our mind wandering. That's a really crucial point in time, because for most of us, this is when the mind will kick in as a judgment. I'm failing in my practice of mindfulness. I'm not supposed to mind wander. I'm supposed to be with my body. And then the mind keeps on into other thought patterns, and you're completely gone. It's important to change our relationship with that moment of finding that the mind has wandered, and see it as an opportunity. This is a huge gift. In the past, your mind wandered, and you wouldn't even notice that it wandered, and it would then run into stories for a long period of time. Now you've noticed. And by noticing, you have the privilege, the option, the opportunity to bring back your awareness from wherever the mind was wandering into the activity. And then it'll wander again, for sure. And you'll bring it back. In a 20-minute walk, if you're practicing mindfulness, your mind will probably wander hundreds of times. Hundreds of times. But think about the beauty of it. Every time the mind wanders, you bring it back, and you are then retraining the mind. It's like any other muscle in your body. You do something again and again, and the muscle gets stronger and stronger. The same applies to the experience of mindfulness. Every time you bring your awareness back to the activity of walking, you strengthen the muscle of mindfulness. It becomes easier next time you walk, or next time you wash the dishes, or next time you're in a conversation, to apply that muscle and be present, experience mindfulness instead of its alternative, mind wandering. And that's a huge improvement and benefit to your well-being. So we need to think also about the relationship. So how do these two formal and informal practices, how do they come together? You could practice the formal practice as a foundation of your informal practice. So if you practice mindfulness formally, say 15 minutes of breathing meditation in the morning and 15 in the evening, that would create a stronger foundation of mindfulness, so that in your everyday life, it becomes easier to practice the informal practice. So when you walk, you use the art of mindfulness that you have learned while you are sitting, breathing. You use it in your walking, you use it in your eating, you use it in your gardening. However, if there's no option for you to practice the formal practice, it's perfectly fine and very effective as well to use informal practice only. It might take longer if it's only informal practice, so it might take longer to see the impact, to enjoy the benefits compared to the combination of formal and informal, but it would still be very, very helpful. And if that's the case for you, and you practice only informal practice, then, as I said, zero extra time to your life. It's just changing the attitude, changing the relationship from duality into oneness. Our long-term vision of this kind of work is to incorporate mindfulness into everything that we do. Because if we integrate that formal and informal practice, as time goes by, you will need less and less of the formal practice. And you will then experience mindfulness more and more as part of its informal application. Do you see what I'm saying? It's as time goes by, or there'll be less and less of a need to set aside time and practice, because mindfulness will be integrated naturally into more and more of your activities. And at some point, as again a long-term vision, that could take dozens of years, but if you do practice regularly and create the kind of practice, at some point, mindfulness is integrated into everything that you do. And that's when mindfulness transforms from a practice into a way of being. And then everything miraculously transforms, and your experience of life deepens, and your self-awareness grows. And there are so many incredible benefits that are part of this journey. It doesn't matter where you are on the journey. You could be making the first step of this journey, and you could be making the final step of it. It doesn't matter. Anywhere within that range, there are wonderful benefits that are waiting for you as part of that practice of mindfulness, formal, informal, or both. So this is almost the end of our session. I'd like to invite you to visit my website, which is awarenessisfreedom.com, where you will find a variety of mindfulness courses, and I'm running an online meditation and mindfulness teacher training you might find interesting. I think that the interest in mindfulness is growing, and it's important for us to have certified, qualified, knowledgeable mindfulness teachers. So if you're interested, check it out on my website. I also have free guided meditations, and obviously you can join my Happify mindfulness track. Before we finish the webinar, before we end, I can take a couple of questions. I have time for a couple of questions. And the first question is from Helena. And Helena is asking whether mindfulness could be helpful with her experience of pain. Well, the answer is absolutely yes. Pain has been found to be one of the areas where mindfulness is most effective. And it's really interesting to think about why is that the case. What we know now from psychological research is that pain is working on two different levels. We have what we call primary pain, and then we have secondary pain. Primary pain is a moment when the pain is initially experienced. So for example, imagine that I wake up in the middle of the night and I'm thirsty. The room is dark. I have no water next to my bed. So I go to the kitchen. And on my way to the kitchen, I stab my toe at the edge of the bed. Boom! I get a wave of pain shooting from my toe to my brain, signaling pain, 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 pain. That's primary pain, and there's nothing we can do about primary pain. Primary pain is part of life, a natural part of life, right? Those kind of little slaps of life, that's inevitable. But that's not the end of the story, because when I experience my primary pain, I react to it. And that's when secondary pain kicks in. I might be cursing, I might be frustrated, I might be telling myself, why didn't I leave a glass of water next to my bed, or why am I being so clumsy? And the body would tense, and I will get secondary pain, experience secondary pain. And the fascinating thing is that we now know from research that secondary pain is frequently as painful or even more painful than primary pain. That's amazing, right? And I see it as an empowering insight, because for me it means that I have a significant control over my experience of pain. Because if I could change my relationship with my primary pain and reduce the reaction to it, I will experience less and less secondary pain. And that's exactly what mindfulness practice is doing. It allows us to shift from a reactive relationship with primary pain, where I'm getting angry, I'm getting frustrated, I'm reacting to it in the body and everything, to something that is much, much softer, which significantly reduces secondary pain. So Helena, to answer your question, absolutely yes, a regular practice of mindfulness makes it easier for us to deal with our pain. One final question from George. And George is asking, what do you consider to be the best or most effective meditation technique? That's a great question. So I have a lot of students who come to me and they say, well, all this mindfulness stuff you're talking about, this is all very interesting, and I even tried it out. I practiced, I don't know, and they said, whatever, breathing meditation or any other technique. And it was terrible. It was terrible. I didn't like it at all. So I realized that mindfulness is not for me, and I'm not practicing anymore. And that kind of reaction for me is the same or the equivalent to going out on a date, having a really, really bad date, a terrible date, and then you go back home and your friends are asking, how was your date? And you tell them, the date was terrible. I'm not interested in romantic relationships anymore. I'm not dating anymore. Doesn't make any sense, right? There are other guys, other girls out there. You will keep on exploring until something feels right. The same applies to the practice of mindfulness. There are numerous techniques. I really mean numerous ways for us to practice mindfulness. It could be by sitting still. It could be by moving our bodies. It could be by engaging with our emotions. It could be by taking a step back from our emotions. It could be with sound. It could be in complete silence. There are so many different experiences. What they all have in common is that unity of activity and our mind that I talked about earlier. But other than that, there are so many ways to experience mindfulness. And because we are all very different people, and we are interested in different things, and we feel engaged under different circumstances, then different meditation techniques, different ways to practice mindfulness would appeal to us. So in a way, the point I'm trying to make is that we have numerous meditation techniques, and I invite you to think about it as a journey where you kind of move into these different invitations of mindfulness and practice. And today it's so easy via YouTube or through courses. Just check out different options, experience different things, and see what feels right for you. And even when you find it, it might be less relevant a week or a month or a year later, and again you'll switch to a different meditation technique. So think about it as a toolbox that you open, look into, think which one is most relevant to my current experience, and keep on playing with them. Be playful with your practice of mindfulness, because it truly is a game that, applied to our lives regularly, creates this incredible transformation. Okay, I would like to thank you from the bottom of my heart for joining my mindfulness webinar. I hope you do visit my website and get in touch if you feel that you want to share or ask anything. And I'm wishing you an incredible, meaningful, transformative practice of mindfulness. Thank you.